Hello everybody and welcome to another video. Today I've got a bit of an album ranking for you guys, a little bit of a different one, but an album ranking nonetheless. Today I'm going to be talking about the band Iron Maiden, which is a band that I actually didn't get into until I would say maybe last October or so. And as long as I've been into heavy metal and stuff, I feel like that's kind of weird. I got into them kind of late. They have quickly become one of my favorite bands. I really enjoy listening to them. And today I'm going to be ranking the first half of their discography. And the main reason for that is because that's pretty much all I've heard at this point. I've also heard Fear of the Dark and Brave New World, but I'm not going to be including those in this video because this is just going to be from their Selftitled up through No Prayer for the Dying, which is the first 8 albums of theirs. And this is a video that I've been considering doing for quite a while, but I have kept forgetting to do it. So that's pretty much why I haven't got to it until now. But yeah, like I said, I'm going to be doing their first 8 albums, the first half of their discography, and one thing I do want to say, first of all, is that even though some albums are going to be lower on this list, of course, that doesn't mean I think they're bad albums. In fact, I have yet to hear anything bad from this band. So first up at the very bottom, I have a bit of an unpopular opinion, actually, when it comes to Iron Maiden albums, and that is Killers. So Killers is Iron Maiden's second album. It was released in 1981. Honestly, even though this seems to be a fan favorite for a lot of people, a lot of Iron Maiden fans seem to love this album, I just can't really get behind it as much. Now, don't get me wrong, like I said, it's still a good album, I still enjoy it, but it's just the one that I enjoyed the least when I listened to it, and I didn't care for it as much as many of their other albums. But there's still good songs on here for sure. I enjoyed Wrathchild, Another Life. I also like Prodigal Son. Those 3 songs I think are really good. Of course, there's other good songs on the album as well, but those are 3 of my favorites. It is a good album, but something about it I just didn't enjoy as much. I didn't think that, it was the album that to me was it was one of the most boring albums to me, basically. It just didn't really do a whole lot for me. I just was listening to it for the sake of getting it listened to. So even though it is a good album, it does end up in the last spot on my list. Next up at number 7, I've got the last album in the first half of their discography, I guess, which is No Prayer for the Dying. Now, like I said about Killers, this was kind of one that I just kind of felt bored a little bit listening to, even though it was still good. Honestly, I would probably say this is the album that I was the most bored listening to, but I would consider Killers a slightly worse album. This one I just didn't really care a whole lot for. I mean, there's, again, some good songs on here. I like Holy Smoke. I think the title track is pretty good. I think Bring Your Daughter to the Slaughter is pretty good. The Assassin, I think, is a decent song as well. So there is good stuff on here again. It's just one that I didn't enjoy listening to as much. Like I said, it was the one I was the most bored listening to, I guess. Even though I wouldn't say I was like completely bored, I was still enjoying it. I was just kind of, again, listening to it basically just to get it listened to. Next up at number 6, I've actually got Peace of Mind. Now, I think this one might be a little bit of an unpopular opinion. Peace of Mind, again, is still a really good album, I would say. I wasn't really that bored listening to it, which I guess is good. And there's some really good songs on here. I really enjoy the first half of this album, really. Revelations, Flight of Icarus, The Trooper, of course, is a classic. Where Eagles Dare is a really good song. So, really, the first half or so of this album, I think, is really solid. The last half is kind of where I feel like it falls apart a little bit. I don't really care much for the second half of the album as much, but the first half of the album is really good. It is still quite good, for sure. Next up, I've got Somewhere in Time. This is actually an album that I enjoyed a lot when I listened to it. And again, there's some great songs on here. Caught Somewhere in Time, Wasted Years, Sea of Madness, Alexander the Great. Those are all really good songs. One thing I actually really liked about this album is just the sound that it has, not necessarily talking about, the actual music, but about just the sound, like in terms of the production, in terms of all of that kind of stuff. It just sounds very unique. It sounds very different. To me at least. I don't know if anybody else feels this way, but to me it sounds very different from any of their other albums. Maybe it's like the synthesizers that they use in this album, because I believe this was one of their first albums to use synthesizers. Maybe that has something to do with it, but just, it sounds different. I don't know what it is about it, but it just sounds very unique, and I really like that about it. It kind of sets it apart a little bit. Some of the songs on here are very good, like I said. There's a couple that I, of course, didn't care for. Deja Vu is one that I don't really care as much for example. I really enjoy a lot of the stuff on this album, and it is, even though it is kind of towards, it's in the bottom half of my ranking, but even then, I would say it's one of my favorites. And next up at number 4, I've got maybe a little bit of an unpopular opinion, I guess, and that is Powerslave. Now, I know that many Iron Maiden fans would have this at like number 2 or something, even though I do think this is an incredible album. The other 3 of their first half of their albums I think are just better. Really, this is an incredible album. I really enjoy it a lot. It is certainly one of their best, at least. I think, you know, the first 2 songs on here, Aces High and 2 Minutes to Midnight, I mean, they're classic Iron Maiden songs. Every fan knows them, and I think they're really great songs. 2 Minutes to Midnight is probably my favorite on the album, actually. The title track is really good. The closing track, Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner, is really good as well. Overall, it's just a really solid album. Again, there's a few songs I don't care for. I mean, Back in the Village, I was kind of iffy on. Flash of the Blade, I didn't care for as much either. But it is a really great album for sure. And even though those songs, like I mentioned, I didn't care for as much, they're still very good songs. So overall, it's a really solid album. And next up, again, I wouldn't really say necessarily an unpopular opinion, although maybe, but one of their most underrated albums in my opinion, and that is their self-titled debut album. I did consider having this at number 2, but I decided to just put it at number 3 because I go back to the second album on the list a little bit more often. This is a really great album. Again, a lot of great songs. Remember Tomorrow and Running Free, I really enjoy. The self-titled song, I guess, the song called Iron Maiden, which is the closing track on the album, is really good. That might be my favorite song on the album, but I'm not sure. It's probably between that and Running Free, at least. Charlotte the Harlot's pretty good as well. Phantom of the Opera, I've heard, is actually one that is quite popular with Iron Maiden fans, but it was honestly one of my least favorites, if not my least favorite on the album. I'm not really sure why, it just didn't really resonate with me the same way as some of the other songs, I guess, but it was still a good song, and this is overall a really solid album once again. Really great debut, one of the best debut albums I've ever heard, actually. And yeah, it's just overall a really, really solid album. And at number 2, I've got Number of the Beast, which is probably the band's most popular album, I would say. Again, really solid album, and I did consider putting it at number 3, but switching it with the self-titled, but I do just go back to this one a little bit more often, and I really enjoy this album a lot. Some people may say it's a bit overrated, and I might kind of agree with that. I mean, I don't think it's like the best album ever made, but I would say it's one of my favorites by them. The opening song, Invaders, is really good. Children of the Dam is really good. The title track, of course, is awesome as well. Run to the Hills is one of their most well-known songs. That's quite good. That was actually my first Iron Maiden song, I believe. Back a few years ago when I first checked them out, I couldn't really get into them at that point. They just weren't for me at that stage in my life, I guess. But that was one song that I actually enjoyed quite a bit. I would say it's probably one of Iron Maiden's darkest sort of feeling albums as well, along with Fear of the Dark, I would say, at least that I've heard. And I do enjoy that about it as well. Yeah, overall, Number of the Beast is just a really great album. At number 1, I have Seventh Son of a Seventh Son. I've said on several occasions this is one of my favorite albums. This is an album that I had in my albums I would give it a 10 out of 10. This was one of my albums that I had on there. I do think this is certainly a 10 out of 10 album. Every single song on here is great. My favorites probably being The Evil That Men Do and Moonchild. I really enjoy both of those a lot. But I mean, Infinite Dreams, that's a great song. Kind of starts out a little bit slower and then kind of builds up a little bit, which I like. Can I Play It With Madness is kind of a classic Iron Maiden song, I guess, so that's really great. Title track is really good, and The Prophecy, The Clairvoyant, and Only the Good Die Young end the album on a pretty good note. It's just a really great album. It's easily their best album in my opinion. I really enjoy it a lot. They introduced some sort of progressive metal elements into this album as well, which I really enjoy. And yeah, overall it's just a solid album, and to me it's my personal favorite. So that's pretty much it for this video. Let me know what you guys think. How would you rank the first half of Iron Maiden's discography? Do you agree or disagree with me on any of these or whatever? And also let me know if you guys would like to see any more like album rankings and stuff, because I do like doing these. It's something that I'd like to do more often, because I've only done 1 or 2 of these before, I think, so I would like to do more. So let me know if there's any bands that you would like me to rank their discography. And that's pretty much it for this video, so I will see you guys next time.